welcome everyone. Welcome to a Friday Focus. This week, which is number 4 in our delivery. It's going to be all about Power BI deployment pipelines. A really cool new kind of feature that we had added fairly recently. That's going to take us through kind of the CI/CD, the DevOps process that we can do, and we brought that natively, and now we've been able to do some ALM process before, application lifecycle management. But actually, really in Power BI terms, we're probably talking about artifact lifecycle management. So kind of the different artifacts, the data sets, the reports, etc. So we're going to explore what we have around the the Power BI deployment pipeline. So let's get started with that. We've got a few people coming in, so I'm just going to be admitting people as they come through. So you may be able to see the screen on the right, which is our kind of loading screen for today's session. It is a 30-minute webinar. We are recording this session, so if you want to go back and refer to it later, we will have that recording up for you fairly soon. And also, if you did miss it live, you can also watch this on our YouTube channel. So let's have a look at what we have in store for you today. So this is number 4 in our Friday Focus sessions. We had one on licensing. There was a second week, which we actually haven't even done the recording for yet. I had to, unfortunately, kind of deal with some kind of a veterinary emergency that week. So unfortunately, wasn't able to do that recording, which I will try and get done over this weekend and get that uploaded. Last week, we looked at Synapse pipeline data flows. So kind of just trying to kind of show you how we do some of the things with those data flows. And then this week, we're looking at deployment pipelines. So let's see what we have in terms of that. So what are deployment pipelines? Let's ask that question first. Well, essentially, think about the way that you deploy currently your resources, your assets, your artifacts into Power BI. You are going to probably publish from the Power BI desktop into one of the workspaces up. Now, if it's a shared workspace, that means other people can access those resources. They can run the reports, they can have access to maybe the data sets, depends on the permissions they have to create new reports, etc. But this goes into a single workspace. Now, the workspace itself can be a pro workspace. That is, anyone with a pro license or premium license can access those resources. But we also have premium spaces as well. Now, this is a premium feature. So don't worry too much. We do have a premium per user license today. So this is all the premium features, including the pipelines that we're going to showcase to you. But you need the premium per user, PPU SKU of the license, or a premium workspace, either a P or an A SKU for the premium workspace. These are my monthly kind of dedicated environments. So say as a premium feature, we're going to need to have a premium workspace in order to make use of the deployment pipelines. Let's look at what is in that. So we have things like reports, either a report or pagination report. We, of course, have our data sets. We have our data flows. We have our dashboards as well. So all these kind of different assets that we have in that. We want to be able to, essentially, with the pipelines, be able to kind of go through a flow from kind of development through to, say, a testing environment, and then finally into our production environment. So we want to kind of check through and make sure the resources we're deploying are ready for the purpose. So we want to kind of test out the new changes. We want to kind of make sure permissions are correct. So you can see on the screen here, we've got a little GIF running that kind of demonstrates the 3 different environments that are kind of created when we create a deployment pipeline. So we will have a development one. Usually we kind of deploy into development first, and then we will kind of publish between and deploy to the next environment. So from development, it then goes into the test environment. And from test, we will then move that into the production environment. And of course, over time, we will have differences as we make new releases and make changes. We need to kind of navigate the infrastructure, kind of understand what's different between those environments and how we deploy between those and what items we're going to deploy. So we might deploy all of the assets, all of the artifacts there, or we might want to be a bit more selective and choose specific items to navigate and move between these environments. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through a demo later on in this session to take you through how we create these pipelines, either through the deployment pipeline kind of link, or from within inside a workspace directly. Now we can compare those environments. You can see here on the screen at the moment, we've got a green indicator between development and test. That's kind of that link between it. You can see there's a green check mark, but there is a orange check mark then between between test and production, which means there's differences. We've compared the environments, and we can see that there's not 100% compatibility between the kind of different artifacts that are in these environments. Now, that could be because we've had a new release and we're actually kind of migrating those changes through. That's usually kind of why we might see differences. It also could be that there's been a change to an environment that's been done that we weren't aware of, and kind of it means that there's a different file, or there's a different kind of value in there in terms of what we have there. Now, we also have at the top of the test and the top of the production, you'll see there's like a little kind of icon for like a lightning right to the kind of to the right of where it says test and production. And these are settings. This is kind of specific environment settings. So we'll explain what those are and how we can kind of utilize those for creating, for example, rules to say what can navigate between those environments again. Now, if you have any questions, please put those in the chat window. I'll do my best to kind of spend some time towards the end, kind of going through any questions you have. And of course, you can always ask questions afterwards on the recording by commenting on that as well. So let's go and look at what we have. So we've got all these different artifacts. We're going to compare them between environments to move the specific kind of artifacts that we need. And we're going to maybe have a selective deployment, i.e. we're going to choose only certain items to move through. All right, how do we get started? Well, there's a number of steps that we need to do in order to make this kind of work. So the first of those is maybe in the left-hand pane, we're going to go to deployment pipelines, and we're going to click that create a pipeline button. And that's going to take us through the key stages, which is creating that pipeline, assignment of a workspace. So the workspaces will be like the dev, the test, the production workspace. Develop and test your context. We need to actually check what we have, or we can see the deployments of each of those artifacts in each of the environments. And we can go and check that and make sure it's working. And then obviously we might want to deploy or publish our app. And that might be something we're going to do where we create a deployment of an app from production, and we're going to deploy that. So we're going to take you through those stages. So stage one is creating the deployment pipeline. Now, remember, this is a or P premium SKU, or it's going to be a PPU user account license to be able to access that information. We're going to take you through how we assign a workspace. So we're going to show you the steps involved in kind of making choices for assigning a workspace, maybe from a blank workspace, a complete new deployment pipeline, and new empty workspaces, or we might even leverage an existing workspace and kind of bring that into the deployment pipeline as well. We probably initially would deploy to an empty pipeline. We're going to deploy our new report, and it will be our data sets and our dashboards and whatever else we want to deploy. And we're going to probably initially start in the left-hand deployment or development pipeline environment. We're then going to make sure that all works, and then we're going to potentially choose which items, either all the items or specific selected items, to move into test. That's our second environment. And these are separated workspaces. These are different workspaces under the covers. And we'll show you what that looks like. And then effectively, we'd then want to also do the same step and move it from test into production. And that allows us then to have a version that we're going to share with our end users that potentially is going to be something that we want to also be able to kind of then, use on an ongoing basis. And then we're kind of new changes, new development is going to go into development first, be validated, go through into test, again, validated by maybe some test users before we move that into production. So the same kind of way we do with ALM today, application lifecycle management, or in this case, I'm going to call it artifact lifecycle management, because we're talking about the artifacts in the Power BI workspace there. Now, we can also create our pipeline directly from inside the workspace. You can see there's a create pipeline kind of link there. And on the right of that, at the bottom kind of right corner, you see that we've got kind of the documentation. We can see that we're needing to assign a workspace. So we're going to do some demos to that and show you that. Okay, let's see all about the differences between the environments. So here you can see that we have an example where we're showing the development and it has, I think, 2 data sets, 4 reports and 2 dashboards, and also has a data flow in this example. The middle environment, the test environment, also has 1 data flow, 2 data sets, 4 reports and 2 dashboards. Okay, and similar, but the production only has 2 reports. It doesn't have all 4 reports. So there's obviously, you can see in between those, you can see there's like an orange link. I don't know if you can see my cursor on the screen, in between the development and test. And then again, there's an orange link between the test and production. So orange means that 1 or more conditions have been met. And that is that there are some differences between the different stages in terms of the content there. So it basically means there's a difference. It's different. If there's a green kind of indicator, it's a nice green check mark on there, means that we have 2 environments that are in sync in terms of the assets, the artifacts there. Now below that, we can expand out and we can actually see more detail. We can see if there's new items, if there's different items, or if there's what we call missing items. So they're not currently in that environment yet, but they may be in this, say, the test environment, but they're not in production. So you can see here we've got some different kind of color indicators and some different kind of information there saying why we're different. So this helps us understand, okay, well, there's a file in terms of global sales and marketing. That report is different. There could be maybe a different visual on there or an update to that report itself. Now, the data sets themselves can also be either new or missing or different. Again, we're kind of expecting to maybe have different data sets and potentially different data sources under the cover. So maybe your development data source could be a different database than your test database, and maybe for your production database. But it could be just a file. It could be a CSV file or some other JSON file that you might be using. So whether it's a database or data file inside the data sources, or the data sets I should refer to here, there may be differences there. Now, at the bottom of that, you can see that we have a deploy to test in the development environment, which is obviously going to choose the selected items, either all of them or just the selected items, and move those into test. And similarly, we've got deploy to production in the test environment, where we're going to move stuff into production from test. And in the test environment, sorry, in production, we have update app. So potentially we might have an app that we deployed inside of the production environment, and we've got some new content come through, and we want to also republish that app in order to get that. So you can see the flow there that's happening there. Okay, let's have a quick look at some of the rules that we can define, and we're going to demonstrate this a little bit in a moment. We have a data source rule, and we have what we call a parameter rule as well. Now, basically, it's the same for data flows, data sets, and data marts. Data marts, by the way, is a brand new kind of capability. It's in preview right now. So be aware that that is something that you might not be aware of. Essentially, a data mart, by the way, is kind of a source of where the data itself then gets put in an Azure SQL database for you, and kind of has a mini ETL kind of self-service capability. So I'm not going to go into lots of details on data marts. We will probably bring that into a further future kind of Friday focus, a bit more drill into that. We're going to probably wait for that to come out preview first, though, before we do that session. Okay, so you can see that we do have kind of parameters that we can also use to parameterize our sources of information. So basically, data sets and data flows can be parameterized. Okay. And also that would be the same for data marts as well. But something like a paginated report, that's that kind of multi-page tabular data set that we have. So we call them paginated reports. So kind of a form, it looks like maybe kind of flow of data. We have page 1, page 2, page 3, etc. Those do not have parameters. Okay. We do them differently under the covers in terms of the data sources. So parameters work differently in there than they do in kind of the traditional kind of data sets. So under here, you can see that we are going to publish from, say, development to test, and we're going to kind of use the rules, essentially, you see this icon in the test environment, kind of that's got a red box around it, and that settings, we can define a series of rules about how we're going to kind of align certain assets together. Now, you can see from the deployment settings, the kind of third middle view there, that we have data flows, data marks, data sets, and paginated reports, and we have our deployment rules that we can define on each of these independently. And finally, you can see an example of some data rows there, rules there that we might want to employ. So we're going to look at those in a moment. We're not going to go heavy on this, but kind of some best practices you might want to be aware of are, kind of planning out your workspaces. So how do we plan out these different development, test, production workspaces? Are we going to use a centralized or different databases for each of those environments? So again, kind of making sure that we kind of understand the kind of source of our data as well. Will we be using parameters? If so, how do we deploy those and kind of make sure we manage those between those environments? Now, one of the things you want to do when you do kind of any production deployment is you want to test it for workload. Kind of how many users have I got enough kind of power behind the curtain in order to process all those requests? So I might want to do some scalability tests. So this we would call simulate production environments, simulate workloads, and that kind of thing from a test perspective. The last thing you want to do is spend all this work kind of getting your environments up and doing all this lifecycle management stuff, and then you kind of haven't done any production testing, and you throw it out there and it kind of falls over because it's too much of a workload that's being kind of handled there. We want to measure performance. We're going to do that with a number of tools, either in Power BI Desktop, using the built-in kind of performance metrics, or we're going to do something with, say, some of the external tools to, look at Tablet Editor, look at kind of some of the tools that we have to measure performance from a engine performance and a visual performance. Because is it the formula engine or is it the storage engine, and how well do those performance work? And then we want to test any of our apps that we deploy. So we want to create our app and deploy it and make sure everything's good and that we have everything right as well. So these are the key things you want to do. Remember, kind of when you're doing your testing, you want to do it kind of maybe with just a handful of users and then see how that scales up. Now, we're not going to get into a lot of detail today, but we do have a number of ways of deploying automated code. So we can do this manually with the deployment pipelines, and I'm going to show you the interface for that. But we also have things like PowerShell scripts in order to kind of provide the information that's going to use the APIs under the cover to actually deploy those resets. So you can see here, we've got a couple of different PowerShell scripts here that the top one's going to kind of work out the different data sets for the different reports and dashboards and data sets, etc. And then we're going to allow creation of those artifacts and deploy those into those environments. We're then going to insert our pipeline ID and have the pipeline being deployed with the Power BI REST API method. So we're going to kind of perform that. And then we're going to have our pipelines going to kind of, create in between those environments. So again, we want to take it from development to test, from test to production, for example. So we say we won't go into a lot of detail, but we do have also Azure DevOps, and we have extensions in there that we can use to create our pipelines in our Azure DevOps pipelines approach. And we can use some of those extensions to create those deployments as well. So there's a few different ways of doing automated deployments. Again, just because of the time we have today and the demos I'm going to do, I'm not going to go into depth for today on the automated side of it, but it's something I want to do for a future one, and I definitely will kind of code up some examples and make those available. So maybe in a few weeks' time, we'll have a automated example of how we deploy this using this example. Okay, demo time. You can't not have one of these sessions without a demo. So what we're going to do now is just going to escape out from my PowerPoint. We're going to go into my Power BI deployment environment. So here you can see here, I've got one of my Power BI workspaces. I've got my deployment pipelines already kind of defined. So I've got the ability to create a new pipeline from here directly. Okay, I can click on that and then it's going to ask me to give my name. So actually, let me just go do that. I'm going to do Friday Focus. I'm going to call it Friday Focus, and I'm just going to do an example pipeline. Now you see here what it's got now. It's got the option to choose a workspace. Okay, now you see here that we have to have the workspace already created. I can choose that workspace. What I can't do is create a new workspace here. I need to just assign a workspace. So I'm just going to choose, say, the test one here. Sorry, the NeoRocks. And I can see I can do assign workspace here. Now, by the way, if you're not sure what workspaces are, you can see here that I have a workspace called NeoRocks already. Let me actually see if there's anything in there. There is a couple of workspaces there, or a couple of items, I should say. There's a sales report, dashboard, and there's a data set. So actually what I'm going to do, let me just go back. I'm going to create a brand new pipeline. Let me go back to that again. I forgot I didn't finish that. Friday. Here's what I want to do first. I want to create my workspace. So let me create a new workspace. I'm going to call this Friday Focus. Okay. And I'm going to call it PPU. So I kind of know that this is a premium workspace. Now, to get my premium, I need to make sure that it's on the premium per user or premium capacity option here. I'm just using one of my accounts that has the PPU license. So I'm going to choose the premium per user here. The reason why I don't have the premium capacity is because it costs a lot of money. And just for demo purposes, it doesn't make sense when I can do PPU anyway. So I'm going to do that, save that. Okay, now, here we can do create pipeline from here. I'm just going to go back to here. I'm just going to do it from here. So we've got our Friday Focus, by the way, up here. Click on that, and now I'm going to assign my new FFPPU. Now notice it only gives me the workspaces that are the ones that have this diamond indicator. And that diamond indicator means it's a premium workspace. Okay. So let me choose that and click assign workspace. Okay, now you can see here that I don't have any data flows or data marts or data sets or reports. So basically it's completely empty right now. And this is really annoying is because they've added an extra one in there. The screen doesn't have enough space now for all of them. A little bit of an interface issue there, I think, really. Anyway, what we do have, because there's lots of white space between these, we have our premium view, and we do know that it's a premium user content. So I'm going to deploy into this workspace a account report. Okay, so I'm just going to grab that. Okay, now I want to do is I'm going to either create a new report, a new scorecard, data set, data flow, all of these. I'm just going to upload a file though. I'm just going to upload an existing file, and I'm going to go and get my local file, and I'm going to go and see if I've got my my Power BI file here. So let me just find my Power BI files, and I should have one available here somewhere. Let's see if I can find one. Okay, let me go to one of my directories and grab one. Okay. So I'm just going to grab one of my old files. Doesn't make a difference which file it is. I'm just going to grab a file. So I'm importing a PBIX file right now. And that's going to be something that then is going to go into that development space. Okay. So let's wait for that to come up. And when it comes up, I'm then going to want to move a copy of that into a test version. Now, remember, I've only created one workspace at the moment, FFPPU. And I didn't reference that it was development or anything. I just kind of created one workspace that we're going to use. So we're going to upload that file. It's quite a big file, so it's taking a while. Okay, now it's importing right now. So let's go and look at that workspace and see what. So you can see here we do have one data set and one report that is available. Doesn't make a difference really what the actual kind of data set is and what the information is inside that, but we know that we have a workspace that has now a item in that. Okay. So let's go back to my workspace. Okay. So going up to my, actually, I've just, sorry, folks, I've just got somebody on my front door. I will be one second to let, hello. So I apologize for that. Typical, it would happen directly during my session here. So let's go to where we are. So we do have our workspace. And you can see here, we do have now one report. And we have one data set. And we also have, in this case, we have a a dashboard as well. Okay. Now, what I can do is I can choose to deploy these items or the selected items that we want for that. So let me just choose, actually, let me just do this. I'm going to do select report and I'm going to do select related. Notice what it did. It actually found that there was also a data set associated with that report. And I'm going to deploy that set. So I'm going to ignore this one, this dashboard here again. Okay, or scorecard, I should say. So we're going to deploy those two items. Okay, now it's now going to create that workspace and copy that data set and copy also the data set and the report from the development space into the test environment. So it's currently creating that workspace, and then it's going to copy those items. So let's go and wait for that workspace to come up. Now notice now, I don't know if you can see here, and I'm not going to try and zoom in because my zoom seems to mess up my screen a little bit. There's one with the word test behind it. And here you can see that we do have one data set and one report, but we don't have the dashboard. Okay, so this is why this is orange, which is why I wanted to do just two items to show you that what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the compare, and it's going to show me that we do have a different data set. Now, why would that be different? In this case, it's different because we haven't yet, when we deploy, if I go and look at this report in here, this will work. If I go and look at this report here, we will have some issues with it because we haven't yet refreshed the data set. So let me show you. We're going to open that report up. You can see here that we've got a report that's loading and there's going to be some data in it, and we're all good. Okay, so this is in my environment called FFPPU. Okay, let me go into my workspace for my test. Remember, we just deployed into that. So I'm going to open up that report. And you see it's broken. Now, the reason why this is, when we've actually copied over the report, what we don't have yet is a refresh in the data set itself. Okay, so see where that's going to take actually probably 10 or 15 minutes for that data set to be refreshed. So I'm not going to try and show you that right now. But when we go back, let me go back to my pipelines. And I'm just going to check this one and deploy this one as well. So I'm just going to deploy the dashboard as well, just to make sure that we have the items 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now we will have a difference here, and say if I do the compare, the difference will be just that data set because it doesn't exist with data in it yet. Okay, so let me just do deploy to production. Now notice, because I didn't select any items, it's not actually, it's going to do all 3 items. That's good. We're going to deploy to that workspace. Again, creating production, going off there. So while it's doing that, let me show you this kind of item. I think I can do it. I'm going to have to maybe wait for that to deploy. Yeah, I'm going to have to wait for that to deploy. So I will also see when it got deployed. And I can see, you know, when I go into certain items, I can see here we've got that now deployed. I can see the timestamps of those. And I'm going to go look at the workspace settings. And this is where we have the ability to change maybe the license to different premium. If we have an Azure connection to an Azure Data Lake Store, ADLS, we can do that here. And also, if I click on this button here, you notice that we do have some deployment rules. Now, if I click on this deployment rule, I can go and add new rules in here that are going to choose maybe the data set, the database. So I've got my path, the URL, or sorry, the file path. I've got my database. I've got the server. Now I could have a different database for production, for test, and for development, and I could maybe change in the server name to reflect that, or the database name. Maybe there's a same server but multiple databases, for example. So I get to choose some of those settings. I'm not going to go through and do that, but what I can do is if I say I'm going to choose the server, I could go and change and have a different one and add a rule in for, say, my file paths. And so if these were different, I can add in these different rules. Now, there's lots of documentation around that shows all that. We won't have time to go through all that today, but you can go and edit your parameters and go and see kind of what those would need to be. So here we can see that if we had parameters, this one doesn't have any, but we can set those up. Now, right now, I've only got my deployment pipeline. Let me show you one I already did earlier. This is an example of one where we have multiple items. And you can see if I compare them, there's some items that are missing, but these other items here are all the same. Okay. And now we're just